Hi, I'm Vincent Sellers. Welcome to another episode of FBI Talk. It's been a little bit since I've seen you guys, and lots has been happening in the world. I'm going to release a couple of videos to give you guys some content during these special times. Today's episode, I wanted to focus on the horrible murder of George Floyd. This is a little bit of an editorial version here, so if you don't want to listen, then that's fine. Skip on to the next video, and I'll give you more tips about joining the FBI and tell you more about that stuff. But this is a serious subject, as serious as it can be, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that and what it means to be in law enforcement and to the FBI agents that are out there trying to do their job when something like this happens. It's an atrocity. I'm sorry, it's a murder that's on camera, plain as day, and it's horrible. And you've seen the results, protesting, which I fully support, and then of course the riots, which or looting and those type of things, which I don't support. So I think probably 98% of the people out there would agree with that sentiment, at least for not supporting the looting. But let's talk a little bit about this, and let me give you my opinion as a former FBI agent. So one of the things that you learn at the FBI Academy is about the application of deadly force, the severity and implications of that, and you get trained left and right, top to bottom, about how you have to be incredibly careful and be 100% confident when you choose to end someone's life that you're making the right decision at that time based on the facts. Now, I don't sincerely believe that this killing of this man in Minnesota was intentional, in that a police officer went out that morning deciding to kill some member of the public. It isn't that, but on the flip side, it is a gross, horrible event, and the police need to be made of an example of in this case. There's just few words I can think of that really describe how I'm feeling about this, but I'm sure, like many of you, it sickens me. So, what about the response? Well, typically when something like this happens, and unfortunately it does happen, and that's the world we live in, and it's up to all of us, citizens, law enforcement, FBI agents, it's up to all of us to be honest about what's happening. And there's two sides to that coin. In the past, I've seen some incidents that the media seems to exaggerate certain facts. And once you learn about the case, you learn about the details, you find out that there are some extenuating circumstances. And there have been several shootings. Sometimes they occur at night. Sometimes there's a mistaken identification of, a cell phone. They thought it might be a gun. And I do feel for the police officers that are in those situations and have to make a split-second decision. And in hindsight, often those decisions turn out to be the wrong one. But at that spur of the moment, that police officer or FBI agent or whoever has a right to go home to their family safely. And, sometimes the intersection of crime and law enforcement results in a bad outcome that's unfortunate for everyone. And I get that. I understand that. And I've seen some of those cases where I personally think the facts are not painted in a fair light about the police officer. However, when you're, crouched on somebody and they can't breathe, and, you do that for 9 minutes and the life is slowly drains away from them, that's not really a spur of the moment decision. There's just no excusing that, in my opinion. So, while the protest and everything that's happening, and why do I feel like in this case it's a little bit different, and that I really support the protest and think the right questions are being asked, and really maybe there is something that needs to be done. In the past, we have seen the Department of Justice step up and be able to do an investigation. FBI does those. Other entities of federal law can do those. There are federal civil rights laws. And civil right doesn't just mean, well, I've got the right to vote or what you think of with the civil rights era. The ultimate civil right is the right to live. So when a police officer or someone takes that right, then there can be an investigation and justice applied. So in this particular case, I do see that the local authorities, they rightfully arrested the police officer, the primary individual that's involved with this incident, and have a murder investigation. There are varying levels with that, varying sentencing, guidelines, etc. So I am glad to see that, and the state of Minnesota taking those actions. I haven't seen anything on the federal level, which disappoints me. I'm sure there are FBI agents that are disappointed as well. Often crimes, be it bank robberies, which I worked many of those, you can file charges with either with the state or the federal government. There are statutes and laws that apply and often overlap. And especially in a case of something of this magnitude, it certainly is something that, in my opinion, should have some type of federal investigative presence there. Sometimes, especially with the local police department, maybe a small police department, you can imagine that maybe all the facts aren't uncovered correctly. Maybe somebody knows somebody, and that's where having an independent federal investigation, be it the FBI or the U.S. Attorney General's office, they have special investigators, and there's other agencies that can get involved. That's really appropriate in this case, and we haven't seen that. So that concerns me a little bit. So that's really what I wanted to say today. I mean, if you're an FBI agent today, I'm sure everybody is recognizing what has happened and the enormity of this moment. And yeah, it's incredibly sad. And as a society, hopefully we can do better. And I think some of the protests, I think it's justified in this case. We need to bring awareness to this issue, and if our federal government is failing us, then the federal government needs to step up and do a proper investigation. And I like the term swift justice. I do like the term fair justice. There are often times that justice is carried out too swiftly. It's a heat of the moment, and so I do think that all factors need to be investigated in this case. And in my book, I don't see how possibly there would be any excusing or dismissing of the case, but there may have been some other mitigating circumstances that I'm not aware of anyway, that might come into play with sentencing and that type of thing. So I'm all for a fair investigation. Often we have seen on the flip side individuals that, especially in older times, pre-internet, when now it's a little bit easier to share information and stories, but we still see this a rush to judgment. Maybe there's a story that's hyped up in the media, or maybe it's just a poor person that can't afford a decent attorney, and they get swept up with the justice system. They have a lousy court-appointed attorney, and next thing you know, they're looking at life in prison for something that they didn't do. And that happens. That's a real thing. From what I've seen, it's much rarer on the federal side. I wasn't involved with any cases of that nature directly, but we've seen that happen time and time again, in particular within the state judicial system, and when you have local prosecutors, local defense attorneys, court-appointed attorneys, that we have seen that or miscarriage of justice rather, play out. And so, to be fair, and we are a nation of laws, we need to follow those laws. And as tempting as it is to rush to judgment and throw someone behind bars for life, we need to step back and look at the facts and let justice play out. And depending on how that justice plays out, then me personally, that will help dictate what I think about the protest and any escalation beyond that. So we'll see how it plays out. So again, today, a little bit of an editorial, just a little commentary from my perspective, if anyone's interested. But these are the type of things, if you're an FBI agent, you will wrestle with this. Maybe not directly, but I guarantee you, if you have that badge and the gun, guess what? You're a cop. You may have a suit and a tie on, but you're a cop. And you're working with cops. And you work with them every day. You work with bad guys. And sometimes often you see justice carried out appropriately. You work with lots of great people. But sometimes you'll encounter that bad apple. And I think the job of an FBI agent and in law enforcement is speaking up and helping weed out those bad apples. And, sometimes there can be a case of seniority and maybe a hesitancy to speak up. We've seen that as a root cause for airline disasters where a seniority of a captain, and maybe there's some cultural significance more than in the United States, but if you follow airline disasters, that unfortunately has been a root cause of some of the worst airline disasters we've seen. Is a senior captain of an airliner is making an error, and the people under him, his co-pilot and flight engineer or whoever, are hesitant to speak up because they don't have that seniority, and that's kind of the way things work. Well, that does happen a little bit, at least in law enforcement. So if you're an FBI agent, you start at the bottom when you're a rookie, and you may be part of some of these scenarios. So anyway, food for thought. This is part of the career. If you're watching this and want to be an FBI agent, this is what you're getting into. It's not all what you see on the TV and wearing sunglasses and chasing bank robbers. You get to do some of that if you're lucky, but not always. The reality is you're a cop, and the world, United States, needs your help to make the right decisions and do the right things. And anyway, that's about all I have to say about that. I hope everyone's doing well and hanging in there. I'll produce some other content, try to be a little more positive, but this particular case really bothers me, and it probably bothers everyone. And we can do better as a country and as a society, and now's a good time to pause and reflect on that, I think. Well, thanks for watching. Appreciate it, and you guys stay safe out there.